So this I'm going to need to take a breath for. All of my work I take breaths for, but this in particular. This is what I hope will be a continued series under the umbrella of the Yale School of Public Health and the Firearm Injury Prevention Initiative, where I serve as activist in residence. It is our intention, among other things, to humanize the face of gun violence through storytelling in a moment in history where all too often we focus on everything but our shared humanity. I have sitting across from me Kristin Song, and she lives in Connecticut with her husband, Mike, and she is the mother of 3 children, Emily, Evan, and Ethan. She's a local grad. She is a UConn grad, both of her undergraduate and law school. She's worked as a litigator until her daughter Emily was born, and then she raised a beautiful family. The rest of her story, I will allow her to tell. And I will start, though, with a story she told me when I first met her. And that is that she said that at some point after December 14th, her and her family love music. And they went to one of my husband's concerts. My husband is a musician. He is a jazz musician. And the Song family, Kristin and Mike, go and they sit at one of his concerts where my husband announces that a song he just performed is in memory of his daughter, Nelba Márquez-Greene. And you look at your husband and you say,
"Thank God it wasn't my child."
Thank God it wasn't your child.
Yes.
And you had, at that time, 3 living children. Do you remember what year that was?
It was months after Sandy Hook. Yeah. And then I had no idea what would befall my family. But I think that's a common phrase or a common thought that a lot of mothers have, you know, when they hear about tragedies to other children, is thank you, God, that it wasn't my child. And then that day on January 31st, it was my child.
So January 31st, 2018.
18. Yes.
You have an extraordinary day.
We do. You know, Ethan was just getting his braces off that morning, and he was the child that had every contraption in his mouth. So it was a pretty big deal in our family. And so we headed off to the orthodontist, and by 10:30 we had gotten out, and I took a picture of him to send to his father, and I texted it to him, and I said, "Look, no braces." And that was the last picture of my son alive. We headed off to breakfast because he had convinced me that we should celebrate. And thank God I said yes. Because at that breakfast, we had probably one of the most meaningful conversations that we've had in our time together. He was just so excited for his future. He was telling me about all of his hopes and dreams. He wanted to go to Rice University. He wanted to join the Army because he had this incredible love for this country. And he wanted to marry and have 7 children.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, it was just, you know, and I remember at his funeral just commenting that I think it was God's way of letting me say goodbye to my child.
You have this beautiful day. You have this extraordinary conversation. And your son does what all of our kids should be able to do and ask regularly and normally, can I go to a friend's house?
Exactly. And this was, you know, he came home from breakfast, and Ethan, 10 years old, asked if we could clear a shelter. He had a love for neglected and abused animals. And so thankfully I said yes again. And so we were on his 95th foster, and I remember coming around the corner, and he was laying in his bedroom, and the sunlight was just on his face, and the little puppy was just, you know, attacking him and licking him. And I just thought, wow, I'm just so blessed. And then he asked if he could go visit his best friend, who he had been best friends since they were 4. So this was a child that I knew very well and that I loved. And I said yes. And that was the worst decision I ever made.
All too often, One way that the general public convinces themselves that this can't happen to them is by convincing themselves that people who lose children or loved ones to gun violence probably put themselves in a position to be at risk or to somehow, I don't want to say deserve because that would be harsh, but to somehow merit but that's not how a lot of gun violence happens, right? We're talking about going to a friend's, attending school, going to a movie, sitting in a park.
Yeah. I think, for me, the majority of the time my kids were at my home, and he had only been at this person's house for, a handful of times. But he was 15, and I knew that I needed to start letting go. And that's really the conversation I was having in my head was I'd prefer that they stayed at my home, but I also understood that he was 15 and he needed to start being able to, walk out of my house and be able to, spread his wings a little bit.
And the truth is that going to a friend's house is a normal part of life. Going to school, going to a movie. That's not why this happened. Sadly, in your case, there was an unsecured weapon and the kids were playing and that an unintentional shooting happened. How are you in this moment today?
Well, I think, as we were chatting before, when you lose a child, especially from something that truly should have been completely 100% preventable, and from such a violent thing, it implodes your world. And we were chatting about having to rebuild your life. And it's very true. All that I knew and loved and trusted the moment those 4 words came out of the ER doctor's mouth, that your son is gone, I literally saw my whole world just implode into a tiny million pieces. And I frantically, for a long time, tried to put those pieces together. And then I realized they were never going to come back together. I had to start building a new family with, my 2 living children and my husband. I didn't, for a long time after Ethan died, I was very hesitant to mother. I didn't trust myself anymore. I had failed at the one thing that I was supposed to do as a mother, which was to keep my child safe. And so I didn't trust my mothering abilities with my other 2 children for a very long time.
As much as I'd like to say, no, that's not right. I completely connect. We had just moved from Canada and made the decision to move to Sandy Hook. And I thought to myself, did we do this? Right?
Yeah.
Did we do this? And you struggle with that. That's a very real struggle.
Yeah. It's very common. And I'm sure you did everything I did, which was from, you desperately go back to the moment you made that one fateful decision that set the dominoes
in place. Yep.
And for us, it was moving from our North Guilford town to downtown, which put Ethan very close to his best friend. If we had stayed up in North Guilford, he wouldn't have gone to his best friend's house that day because he couldn't have walked to it. And I wasn't going to drive him. So, this is the stuff that you do that just drives yourself crazy is the what ifs, I should have, because, I'm sure you did the same thing for months after. I tried to reinvent the finality of it to figure out a way to turn back time so that I could save my child. And it's, it's not rational, but you're pretty irrational after you lose a child. At least I was.
It's not rational, but it is pretty normal, I think. And I think it's pretty, I don't know how you would experience something like this and have anything but that. I would have dreams after of going to the school, because I had just gone the week before for Special Language Day. We had read the announcements, me and Anna and Isaiah in the morning at the same time. Adam Lanza stormed the building, we'd read the announcements in Spanish. It was, language week. And for weeks and weeks and months, I had dreams of going back that week, of seeing Adam Lanza walking in with an AR-15 and offering him an orange. And that somehow my offer would have had him put the gun down. So it will not make sense to many people, but it does make sense to me. Yeah. In your rebuilding of your family, you've spent the past many years with like a fierce and unending dedication and commitment to change laws. And as part of this unintentional shooting, you made some discoveries after that. Would you mind walking us through some of the discoveries you made on what laws were then and what changes you've impacted since then?
Sure. So in our case, the father, the gun owner, had 4 unsecured weapons in his house. He had a rifle in his coat closet, and he had 3 unsecured handguns with ammunition stored in a shoebox. 2 weeks before my son was killed, he showed my son how to shoot a gun in his backyard without our knowledge or permission. And so he really understood that these boys were very interested in guns. He brought his son to a shooting range and videotaped it, and his son shared that video with all of his friends. So this was not a father that should have been shocked that the teenage boys or his son was looking for the guns in the house. And in fact, we learned after the investigation that his son actually had a handgun stored under his personal bed for about a month. So this father was absolutely negligent in his care for deadly weapons. And, I thought that the law would charge the father, would charge the person who brought deadly weapons into a home, and should have been charged with the responsibility and accountability of making sure that those weapons were not touched by children. But I sat across from the prosecutor the day before the first Thanksgiving without Ethan, and she told me that she was going to charge the 14-year-old son with manslaughter and that the father would have 0 consequences. And I think that day the fire was lit in me. And I looked across the table and I said, how do we change this? And she said to me, you have to change the law. And I said, it will be done. And we passed Ethan's law, June of 2019, it was signed into law. And it really was, like you said, it was like just this fierce determination that I was not going to let another parent suffer the way I had, in the sense that there was no justice for my child's death. And as equally important, I wanted to start changing the culture in our state. And then I wanted to start changing the culture in our country, where it becomes second nature to lock your guns up when you have children in the home.
I want to ask you so many questions based on what you said. First of all, incredible show of determination, of spirit, and just so much to you. Secondly, I think if you live in Connecticut, it would be hard to hear Kristin Song without knowing exactly who he is. But since we probably have people who are listening not in Connecticut, when you say Ethan's Law, tell me a little bit more about Ethan's Law.
Ethan's Law is very simple. It impacts homes where a child will either live or visit. And when a child is in your home, it is up to the gun owner. It is up to the adult in the home to make sure that those guns are secured so that children cannot gain access. And that's simply what it is.
That seems like something we can all rally around.
Yeah, you would think. Sadly, the president of the NSSF came down and testified against Ethan's Law in Washington, D.C. And when Senator Blumenthal really kind of pushed him and put him on the hot seat, he basically came down to, we just don't want a mandate. We just don't want any more laws passed. So our children suffer because the NSSF, had a tantrum and have decided that it's more important for gun owners to be able to leave loaded guns around their home than to protect our children.
I've never spoken to you where you have said you in any way want to restrict anyone's rights. And I think that's a big misconception among people outside of our population, which is people, firsthand primary survivors of gun violence or people who have lost someone to gun violence. Everyone not everyone. Let me be really careful with my words. There are a lot of people out there who think, oh, those are the families just want to take our gun rights.
Right.
I don't know too many people who want to butt up against the Second Amendment. Just reasonable measures like safe storage.
Exactly. I mean, listen, there's 400 million guns in America now. Those guns are not going to go away. So it is imperative that we change the culture in this country where it becomes second nature just to store those weapons, just like it's second nature for you to secure your child in their car seat.
Right.
Or make sure you have working smoke detectors or fences around pools. Or, now the cars all have backup cameras. Why do you think they have backup cameras? Because people were running over their toddlers. That's why we have backup cameras. We don't do that to infringe on your rights. We do that because our children are that important to us. And we know with these simple measures, we can save thousands of children. And that's the bottom line. When you go through, as an attorney, research was really my comfort zone. And so after Ethan died, I started researching all the ways that our children were dying regarding guns. And basically the common denominator is unsecured weapons. The majority of our children, 80% of children who die by suicide, are using an unsecured gun, and the majority of them are from home. So if you can give your child the gift of time by locking up the gun, so that you can perhaps give your child, the gift of counseling or, care, you're going to have a child that I almost guarantee you will go off and be a productive citizen of the United States. But the problem is that once you enter in a gun, the conversation is completely different. And the majority of moms that I've spoken to whose children have died by gun suicide with an unsecured gun have almost all of them, except for one, have told me they had no idea their child was in crisis. Listen, teenagers are really great actors. Think back to when you were a teenager. You didn't run to your mother and tell her all about your problems in school. You told your friends, and then your friends gave you advice. You have children giving children advice. So, you have to just be aware that, you may think you know your child so well. I thought I knew Ethan so well. Never in a gazillion years did I think that my child would pick up a gun, and so do not lull yourself into a false sense of security. If you have children in the home, lock up your guns. You are going to be thankful that you did.
When I listen to you, I hear an incredible amount of reasonableness, but kind of like this overwhelming love. And I can feel how much you love Ethan and your surviving children by how you talk about this issue. You're not suggesting, I haven't even heard you badmouth anyone. You've basically just said, please, I don't want anyone else to experience the pain that I'm experiencing, so this is what I'm asking for. And that has to come with some internal work, but also hope. How do you retain hope this long after?
If you don't have hope in this movement, you got to get out of it. It's really comes down to that. If you don't have hope that there's going to be a better tomorrow or a better future for our children, then you kind of need to pack it up and move on to something different, because the gun violence prevention movement or this arena is as divisive as the abortion issue. When you step onto this path, you need to make sure that you are aware of what you're getting into, which is, in my case, death threats, trolls, people blaming me, that it's my fault that my child is dead. But at the end of the day, I just care about saving children. Thankfully, my personality takes all of that negative energy and it just actually fires me up to do more, to prove them wrong. Because I know that I'm on the right side of God. I know that I'm on the right side of humanity. I don't know anyone in this world who could say that the greatest calling is not, that to me, the greatest calling is to save children and protect them. And so when I lobby down in DC, I have a list of children who have been killed with unsecured guns. And I not only lobby for my child, but I lobby in honor of them. And I lobby in honor of the living children who potentially could be killed.
Okay. I said I needed to take a breath, and I do. I need to take a couple. In your best view, how can someone become involved? They are listening to you. They feel compelled. They are like, look, I want to get involved, but I'm not a litigator. And I'm not necessarily someone who can speak to lawmakers. What would you say to someone listening who wants to be involved?
You can start simply in your own home. If you are a family that owns guns, make sure that you're adamant that they're secured. If you do not have them in your immediate control, you can teach about safe storage. I've had everyone from school nurses to, law enforcement who have been advocating and promoting and educating on safe storage. I tell people that when I started out on this path, I had no connections, I had no money, and I had no power, but I had a sheer will to make a change. So you don't need a $10 million organization behind you. You just need to be really adamant and determined in what you want to accomplish. And that could be, I want to make sure that a letter goes home to everyone in my district talking about safe storage. So for example, in Guilford, the superintendent generally sends home a letter reminding parents before the holidays, before summer break, your children are now home with you a lot. So if you have guns in the home, make sure that you secure them. Just something like that could save a child's life. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be in DC, sitting down with Ted Cruz, or, testifying in front of Congress. Every little bit
does help.
Yes, is pushing that cultural shift.
And if someone wants to help you specifically, how would they best do that?
It's funny. So many people say to me, I don't vote. I don't, call my legislator. I'm telling you, I'm in DC all the time, and I'm sitting in offices waiting to meet with, senators or representatives or their staff. And when those phones go crazy, I will go up and say, what are the constituents calling you about? And they have to write down and record every single conversation that comes in and every single email and every single letter. And then they present that to the senator or representative. So, if the other side is calling and calling more, the senator's going to say, well, I've heard from my constituents. They want to make sure that we have no gun safety laws. So it is imperative that you call and make your voice heard. They really do listen to you. You may not think that because you're in your small little town and DC is so far away, but I'm telling you, they are recording all that information. So I guess my frustration is, stop shrugging your shoulders and wringing your hands and hoping and praying that something's going to get better while you stand on the sidelines, because we need your help. You and I we're exhausted, And so, I'm not going to stop, but I'm exhausted. So it'd be wonderful to have some help.
It feels deeply offensive to accept condolences from someone who doesn't vote.
Yeah. I always tell people, if you don't vote, do not complain to me.
Don't even say I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah. Yep. And, I get it. Not everyone is... Listen, to be perfectly honest with you, when I had my lovely little family in my small little ordinary world, I wasn't involved in gun violence prevention. I was worried about, where's my son's baseball uniform? That morning I remember running around looking for his uniform because I knew I'd washed his pants, but I couldn't remember where I put them. I was chatting with Ethan about, we need to finish your World War II project tonight. It's due tomorrow. It is time. Those were the things that were hitting my radar. It wasn't until I was directly impacted that I got fired up to do something. And I guess, my hope is that people will get involved before they're sitting in our chairs.
Did you find the pants? Did you find his clothes that morning?
Of course.
You did.
Mom's always,
We always find.
Yeah.
The first time you do laundry after your child is gone is always, I still remember that moment. That's why I asked if you found the pants, because I think that is something that stays in and that's something we try to prevent for other moms every time.
It's funny you talk about that. So, when Ethan died, I couldn't hear him anymore. I couldn't see him, but I could still smell him.
Mm.
You know, he was a teenage boy, and I had texted him that Monday. He died on a Wednesday. You know, can you please crack the window of your room? He was a typical teenage boy. And he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I was never so happy because I would go into his room and I would just lie in his bed and I would take the dirty laundry out of his clothes and I would just smell him.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I would do that every morning. So I would get up at like 4 a.m. and I remember opening his door and there was no more Ethan. His smell was gone. And I remember just falling to the ground and just sobbing.
I don't know that people understand that the recovery, resilience, kind of turn your pain into purpose does exist. And also this exists. The grief exists, the longing exists, the pain exists, the changed trajectory of future.
Yeah.
Like you, I have friends who sit with us in our little group, and I have friends who have whole families. And when I hear them, I don't say anything because everyone has a right to complain about their child's room being messy or how expensive those hockey lessons or whatever school is. But I'm always quiet when they say, isn't it annoying they're staying up too late making noise? Because boy, what we would give to have all of our whole family together making noise, right?
Yeah. It's funny. We never realized it was a luxury.
Yeah. It is a luxury.
It is a luxury to have, you know, to pay for your child to go to college. It is a luxury to have their rooms trashed.
To smell the smell of funky boy, you know, is a luxury. To buy a prom dress is a luxury. And 100%. It shouldn't be, and it can be better addressed for families with safe storage laws. Yeah. Your safe storage laws under Ethan's law have actually changed things in multiple states.
Yeah. So, you know, we passed Ethan's law in the House of Representatives in 2022. And then we pivoted to the states because we understood that we were not going to get through the Senate at that time. And so, you know, I was undeterred. You know, I still lobby down in DC all the time. And Ethan's Law has one of the highest co-sponsors in both the House and the Senate.
I saw that. And bipartisan.
Not bipartisan. It's all Democrats at this point.
Oh, okay.
But in 2022, it was a bipartisan vote. We did have Republicans vote for Ethan's Law. So, you know, I just pivoted. To the states. And I just found, honestly, what I did was I looked for survivors like me. And I went through states and I found mothers and fathers whose children should not have died, that their deaths were 100% preventable. And I started reaching out to them and saying, you know, it doesn't need to be Ethan's Law. This could be named after your child. You know, will you come and fight with me? And some of them, all they could do was show up and testify on that one day because that's all they could do. But like you said, the stories behind the statistics are what people need to hear.
Yeah.
Because that's really what changes hearts and minds. And I found through my lobbying efforts, if you can change people's hearts, their mind's going to follow.
Because the truth is they don't want to be us. Yeah. They don't want to sit here. And they can look in your eyes and they can say, oh my gosh, this is a real thing that changed your family forever, and I don't want this for other people. You can't help but sit across from you and be compelled. You've done this with Ethan's Law. You've also done other things. And one of the things you are trying to do right now is develop a set of lessons to be used in schools for education for young people around safe storage, around regulation. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and this project?
Sure. When we were fighting to pass Ethan's Law in Connecticut, you know, I met with the first people that my husband and I met with were the Republicans and the CCDL, which is like the NRA branch in Connecticut, because we knew that we were going to get the most pushback probably from them. So those were the first people we sat down with. And one of the things they continued to say was, you know, if Ethan had been educated, he would not have touched the gun. He would have understood gun safety. I'm all for education, but I do want people to understand that teenage boys, you can pour into your children as much education and love and knowledge and wisdom, and they're still going to step out of your door and make independent decisions. Ethan's best friend, 2 weeks before Ethan died, had taken the NRA safety course and scored 100. The police told me the family actually framed that certificate and it hung in their living room. So this was a child who just, 14 days before had gone through the safety program and still brought out unsecured guns and ammunition and laid them out on his bed.
Because these kids, their brains are still developing. We know that they're
100%. And that's, when I talk to people, I always say that, did you ever engage in risky behavior? Because if you did and you're still talking to me, you just got lucky. That's all. That's the difference between your child living or you living and me not, that's really what it comes down to. And I have not met one person who can tell me with a straight face that they've never engaged in risky behavior.
Of course not. Yeah.
Actually, I had one man on Twitter tell me that he's never engaged in risky behavior.
Oh, but that's also Twitter, right? Yeah. Home of big talk and no reality.
I said to him, so I said, you've never sped? He goes, nope, I go exactly the speed limit. So whatever.
Yeah.
I said he should write a book because he would.
Perfect person. How to be the perfect person.
Yeah, $1 gazillion.
Yeah.
But, that's the thing. Teenagers, the definition of especially teenage boys is reckless behavior. So that is why it's so imperative that we as adults protect our children from themselves. Mm-hmm. And especially teenage boys are that's the highest age group that die. And we know why. It's because they engage in reckless behavior. Mm-hmm. So the education. So I said to the Republicans and the CCDL, absolutely, 100%. I'm a coalition builder. I am collaborative. If you have a great idea and you're not from the party that I belong to, who cares? If the goal is to save children, I'm all for it. And so thankfully, I met Robin Fox, who has written tons of curriculum, and she came up with this really great series of lesson plans that talk about, just honestly, she runs through a whole bunch of different scenarios based on real life situations, real life headlines out of the newspaper of children who have died because of unsecured guns, so that children can have an understanding and role play. I find it hard, even as adults, when you get into tricky situations, to be able to get yourself out of them or to be able to say the appropriate thing.
To de-escalate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So why we expect, teenagers to be able to have this magic power is, beyond me. So it just gives them some tools. And honestly, it can translate into like drug abuse or drinking and driving or anything where they find themselves in a situation where they do not want to be in.
So I want to make sure that I'm kind of thinking about this. You are encouraging folks to maybe reach out and support, by voting. And also you're saying that Ethan's Law, right? A parent in a different state you can say, hey, name it after your kid, but help us support safe storage laws in your community. And then you have this, on a different side, group of lessons, right? That you're currently in the process of writing, evaluating, and looking for support for, and also, let's be clear, dollars, right? So that you can have more just kind of bandwidth to do the work of writing the lessons and sharing the lessons and all of the scaffolding work that comes along with distribution of lessons like this in school districts. You want to be in school districts, not just in Connecticut, but maybe nationwide. Yeah. Let's dream big. So if folks want to reach out or offer support for that project or any other of your projects, how could they reach you?
They just need to go to songstrong.org, which is our website.
Songstrong.org, yep. SONGSTRONG.
Yes.
.org, yep. Songstrong.org, and they can reach you for that. And that leads me to my last question, which is, you also have a foundation. Yes. And with a foundation that honors Ethan's life, you do the things that he talked to you about. You just told me that in the green room on that last day. You kind of animals and supporting veterans and the things that were just kind of so in line with his beautiful spirit. Can you tell us about that too?
So the December before Ethan died, so 2017 December, a Wreaths Across America truck passed us on the highway, and Ethan said, what is that? And so I said, I don't know. And so we went home and we Googled it. And it's about honoring our veterans who have either passed or been killed in action. And he said, I want to do that in Guilford, Mom. I think we should, here's a 15-year-old kid. At that time, he was 14, telling me that, he wanted to honor the veterans of Guilford because he understood the sacrifices they made. Ethan's grandmother was a hidden child in Nazi Germany, and he was pen pals with her. And so he had a deep understanding of how America saved his grandmother. And he unfortunately died before we could do Wreaths Across Guilford or America. And so the next year, we started it in Guilford. So that's just one of the ways that we honor Ethan, but also honor the veterans whose shoulders we really stand on. And then he just had such a love for animals. And, the kid was born with empathy from the day he was born. He was a child that did not need to be taught that. After Ethan died, I had many parents reach out to me and share stories about how Ethan either invited their child to their lunch table because their child had no one to sit with, or the very shy girl in French class who, no one sat next to, and Ethan made sure he sat next to her and chatted with her. Just all these really lovely stories about how Ethan, stood up to the lacrosse bully and protected this other boy who could not stand up for himself. Just a love for protecting the marginalized and vulnerable. And so that carried on from animals to people. So, he was definitely a child that I thought was going to go off and change the world. And I remember saying that to him that morning at breakfast, that he was going to go off and do wonderful things. And I was so excited to see what that was. And, I think for me, after Ethan died, I didn't realize that I was going to have to pick up that and change the world or the country on behalf of him.
So the name of the website is songstrong, SONGSTRONG.com. .org. My bad. And one more question I can't get enough of you. In public health, we tend to look at problems through an ecological model, both for how the problem impacts different parts of our society and community, the individual, the family, the neighborhood, laws, and just kind of out, and also how those things impact the problem. You've talked to me about laws. You've talked to me about change in community. You've talked to me about change you've wanted to make locally. If anybody wanted to help you, what would be the best way to offer you support?
Well, that's not really an area that self-care is not really in my vocabulary.
I can tell, that's why I asked.
So, for me, I tell people that the day I can get Ethan's Law passed nationally is the day I will rest. And that's really true.
So as you're doing that, if someone brings you a glass of water, if someone offers you your favorite,
I will say, what's really helpful is when I get kind messages from people.
So kind messages.
Yes, I will say that, I just got actually a message via LinkedIn this morning about, I don't even know who this person is, but they have been following me and just applauding my efforts to keep children safe. And that gives me, it fills my cup. So that would be lovely.
I could tell. So first, I want to say that I heard you say kind messages, and I hope everyone else hears me say kind messages so that you can get flooded with kind messages. But the second thing I want to say is I can tell that was kind of hard for you. And it's hard for every person I interview to identify the thing for self, because we are so consumed with the thing for our loved one, the thing for the nation.
So true.
I think it's also important. Recently, I think it was 2 weeks ago now, I had Chelsea Clinton visit my daughter's school, and everybody was really excited. Everybody's really wonderful at Anna's school, and they were understandably really excited. But one person, it was a family liaison, she stopped. And at one point I was walking by myself waiting for Chelsea to get out of her car and come inside the school. And she touches my arm lightly and she goes, "Hey, I just want to tell you that this is all very exciting. And I'm so thankful. And also, I am praying for you all the time, and this sucks, and it should never be, and we shouldn't even be here. And I am just, she held space for both the hope and the action, and also the fact that my life would never be the same. That's my love language, when I know that people understand the depth of that. So that's why I always ask the question, because I think it's important for folks to know. And there are people listening who want to help in so many different ways. And maybe their way won't be, another way, but sending you a kind message was also matters, so that you can have the fuel you need to keep doing the work.
Yeah.
I was going to say I'm thrilled to have you, but I'm not, because you shouldn't be here, and neither should I. But I'm grateful that you shared your story, that people will be more informed on how to help survivors, also on safe storage laws. And if there's any way the community at Yale or outside of it can help provide support, you heard it. You heard her say what she needed to say. And also, we should do that thing. We should do all of the things for survivors. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening. Shared Humanity is produced by the Yale School of Public Health. Follow us on social media at Yale SPH, and learn more at sph.yale.edu/shared humanity. Thank you to the Yale Porvu Center and Yale Broadcast Studio for their support. We hope this episode empowered you to take action toward positive change and hope.